No more 22 for a high. No more colds, flu, or old age. No more nights without sex.
And he will wipe out every tear from their eyes, and death will be no more. Neither will mourning, nor outcrying, nor pain be any more. The former things have passed away. Revelations 21:4.
And death shall have no dominion. Dead men naked, they shall be one with the man in the wind and the west moon. Dylan Thomas, who loved California. I don't think anyone knew the truth except Ward. I don't think he told anyone. Maybe Mom knew, but there was never any talk of it. And if there were, it was all hopeful. You're going to move into a nice house and your cough will disappear. You're going to start feeling strong again. You're going to eat fresh fruit and everything will be fine. Just leave everything to us. We said goodbye. They drove us to the station and we boarded the train from LA. I decided that if we moved out there, I would most certainly be on the Mickey Mouse Club.
Annette.
Yes, to meet Annette. Catherine had a job out there at the Broadway, a department store in LA. While there, she met a woman in management, or maybe she was a big-time buyer. Early in our visit, she and her husband invited us for dinner. They had a daughter around my age, and she was a wild child. I had a crush on her, and the attraction was immediate. I tried to act nonchalant. I stole some of Jack's cigarettes and lit them and offered her one. I repeated lines I'd heard in movies. Anyway, their house was a big hacienda with maids' quarters in the back. The woman's husband, it seems, was a suit down at CBS and was hardly ever home. I remember my mom oohing and ahhing at the furniture when it hit me that I never imagined other kinds of family. I never thought that a man and a woman could be married, live in the same house, have a daughter, and never speak to each other. When the daughter gave me a tour of the place, the parents had 2 separate bedrooms. The girl called it a studio.
When I was a kid, I watched movies like Rebecca, where the couple had separate bedrooms, and I thought, oh, that's what rich people do.
Why do married people sleep in separate beds? Because they can!
Never mind that their marriage is nothing more than a business arrangement. Either way, it's just being human.
So, our time was up. We're on the train, on the ride back. We're in the desert, and Mom's sitting by the window, crying. And I'm sad, just staring out at nothing. Dave isn't with us anymore, and I'm stuck with my sad family again.
But you did think you were moving back, right?
Yes, I thought we would. Or I thought there was a chance we would. But she was crying. She missed her mom already, or maybe she knew something. And then she said something I'll never forget. Look at all that empty space out there. And back east, we have people stacked on top of each other. I thought, what a heavy burden to bear. I don't know, I didn't know I'd have to live 30 years to be able to answer her. It's a desert, Mom, because there's no water. No water. And being from the east, it would never occur to us that the west is parched. It's like my friend, Fred, said, who lived in SoCal most of his life, said to me, Jeff, what's wrong with Erie? It's got water. Anyway, we took the train and hardly talked to each other. It was very hard to get our lives back. I remember getting to Chicago and deboarding into our old life. Later, when I'd write the book, I'd create the details, but I suspect they'd have some resemblance to something felt, if not actual events. We had time to kill between trains, but not enough to feel free with. We wandered around the loop, window shopping, standing before churches. Finally, we went to a restaurant for lunch. I think it was Schraff's, where some foul-up occurred, I'm not sure. But Mom got pissed off about our order. Either I don't remember this part, or I always assign Ward the role of mediator. Jack, just calm down, he'd tell her. That scene probably wouldn't have occurred before World War II. But the guys home from combat had already fought their war. They didn't have to fight waiters. Our moms fought with waiters. Most men only wanted to smoke and read the paper. But a lot of wives were ready to go to war.
And I'll bet she was thinking, why is he not on my side?
How can he be so numb to what's going on? Doesn't he care? Ward voted for Eisenhower in '56, she for Stevenson. Even though he's a Democrat, that year Ward voted for the War Connection. I like Ike. He's one of us. Chicago was the first time I glimpsed how it was going to be from then on. I saw my mom's illness rear its head in agitation, exhaustion, rage. I don't know what was going on beneath her skin, but each day I watched the woman become hard or
Unraveled?
like a ball of yarn. Anyway, we crawled into Erie that night. No conductor barked out to stop. We were the only ones getting off. The train was bound for New York and wouldn't arrive till late that morning. I wanted to be somebody who never got off till the end. We took a cab home and went to bed. The next day we sat around staring at things. My sisters were not picked up till later. Then we were a family again. A week later school started and I went into the 5th grade. That year I got glasses. And I received a sacrament, confirmation I think. Somebody gave me a plastic crucifix with a gold lame Jesus stretched on it. I wore white buck shoes, white jacket, my hair slicked back like Dan Duryea in some secret tryst with Yvonne DiCarlo. One day I found Mom wrapping dishes in newspaper. She announced that the call had come that Ward had got the job at USC, and sure as shit, we were California bound. I was so happy I ran over to my friend's house with the news and he said, "So you're really going to be on the Mickey Mouse Club?" "Yes," I said, now firm in my conviction. I was the only kid I knew who was going to be on the Mickey Mouse Club. I didn't know about Mom's illness, except that she slept late on most days. Ward would rise early to go teach and leave the girls locked in their room. And when Mom appeared, she looked ghostly and insisted no one make a sound. She didn't talk about being sick, but whatever it was getting worse. One day that fall, I was riding my bike. I was a late bloomer when it came to bikes. First of all, I didn't have a bike, and when I finally got a used one, Dad took his time fixing it, and then was slow to teach me as promised. When I tried to teach myself, I got banged up, but after a couple of lessons, I got the hang of it and began riding everywhere. I never went home, but this day I decided to stay close by when he called me. It was nearly sunset. He said, "Your mother went into the hospital today." I don't recall being too concerned. I knew she was sick, but I didn't really feel it.
Maybe you thought, well, she's in the hospital, she's young, she'll get better and be home soon.
Yeah, she'll be okay. She'd gone in before and always came home. Then Ward dropped the big one. "Geoff, I have to tell you something. We're not going to California." And that's when I lost it. "But why?" I slobbered. And he said he'd made a deal with God. He asked God that if Mom got better, he would promise to remain in Erie and teach young men to be priests. That's what he did. He taught Latin and Greek to seminarians. That sounded so strange to me, the idea of negotiating with God. I mean, kids did it when we got in trouble, and drunks do it, but I thought adults were reasonable.
But she didn't get well, and he still chose to stay in Erie.
Yes, he did. Maybe that's the story you tell yourself. Okay, I'm scared right now. And when you're scared, you don't go off to a strange place where you don't know anybody. His family was in Erie. His friends. His only professional experience was here. Maybe had she even lived, he would have opted to stay. But when I think how he got that close to how he really felt about things, afforded by her illness, maybe it's enough to make a man see where his heart really is. And so she did come home. Christmas was coming, and she craved one last one with her children. And no one would mention cancer. It would be perfect.
Even then, wasn't cancer one of those things you didn't mention? I mean, some people thought it was contagious.
People were slow to call it cancer till you were jaundiced and down to your last 20 pounds. So what happened was that we had to sell the house. That is, we had already sold the thing, thinking we were heading west. But now everything changed. Ward called the buyer who had just closed the deal and said there'd been a reversal of fortune. My wife is sick and we can't think about moving right now. And I suppose he offered the guy some options. Sell it back at a profit or wait a year before taking possession and rent us the house, etc. My father pleaded.
The guy said no.
The guy said no. So we had to find something, quick. We ended up getting a little place across from a girls' college. It was Mercyhurst. I didn't think of it as our house, but as a temporary place, though we never did move away. This was our interim life, I felt. Not a real life, but a rupture in reality, a detour. The month leading up to Christmas is mostly a blur. Gray skies and the candlelit procession of Advent. Jack and Catherine had sold everything out west and moved with Dave back to Erie to find a tiny apartment. Unable to get warm in their flimsy clothes. Mom lay at home snoring or screaming, depending on her med schedule. On bad days, she'd bang her head against the headboard and curse. Once she crawled out of bed and beat her forehead on the floor, begging to die. I ran downstairs. "Mom," I shouted, "what should I do?" A clutter of get-well notes and holy cards on the nightstand, rosary, holy water, Kleenex. You could smell the cancer. Before the morphine faded, she'd asked me how school went that day. I didn't wish to bore her. At night, she'd scream while I tried to watch the sitcoms on TV. On Christmas Eve, she lay dazed in bed when a school bus pulled up in front. They were Ward students filing off the bus like something out of Dickens. And they sang a cappella while snow tumbled in big, lazy flakes. Ward turned off the TV and went to be with Jacqueline, their last time to lie together. Mom's eyes swelled in a kind of ecstasy, like she saw God. When the choir finished, Ward stepped out and invited them for eggnog, though there was none in the house. But they declined and got back on the bus and rode off. I'm sure on that night, Ward was sure he'd made the right decision.
Yes, I see.
After New Year's, they could no longer manage the pain. One day, out of the blue, my other grandfather took me to see Around the World in 80 Days. We'd never done anything like that before, so something was up. On the way home, he said my mother had been taken by ambulance to the hospital. I never saw her again. Maybe I talked to her on the phone when we'd gather around and take turns. And we got to look up at her once from the street and saw her wave. That year I attended 6th grade at a new school. One day in January, the pastor came into our class and asked the nun if he could have a word with me. In the hall, he asked if I'd like to visit my mom that day after school. I said sure, because it sounded like the right thing to say. At 3 o'clock, he got me and we went in his car downtown. Soon I was talking, trying to sound like the rational one. "Well, Father, I'm not really old enough. They said I'm not old enough to go in." And by the time we got downtown, about a block from the hospital, I think he'd heard enough. He said, "Okay, I'll tell you what, maybe this isn't a good idea. I'll take you home, and I'll tell your mother I saw you, and that you send your love." You see, he'd heard something that just didn't jibe with the facts. Anyone would have assumed that despite my age, I would have been permitted to visit my mother. The woman was dying. It wasn't the hospital. The order had to have come from elsewhere.
Your mother? She couldn't bear to be seen like that? seeing you and your sisters being like that, I can't imagine.
A week later, when she died, her mother was in the room. Catherine, her mother, would describe the end as beatific. The end! Huh!